My name is Jeremy Elias. This is my exegetical talk on 1 Samuel 13, 8 to 15a. I'm delivering this talk to officer cadets and midshipmen from the Australian Defence Force Academy, which is where I do ministry. So they are university students who are signed up in either the Australian Army, Navy or Air Force. What happens when you get stressed? How do you react? How do you act in order to take control and perhaps try and remove that stress? Our passage today finds us in the early stages of Saul's kingship over Israel. A few chapters earlier, Saul is anointed king over Israel by Samuel after the Israelites demanded a king, essentially rejecting God's kingship over them. The book of 1 Samuel continues on after the book of Judges, and we see the same challenges facing Israel are still present. That is, the Philistines are pushing in on them, threatening the land that has been promised by God, and the Israelites continue to suffer the sin and judgment cycle, and they require the gracious salvation that they did during the Judges period. In our passage, Saul is under some serious stress. Jonathan has disturbed the hornet's nest by raiding a Philistine outpost near Geba. Israel is summoned to join the small army that's already been amassed. We read prior to Israel being summoned that there were 3,000 Israelites facing Philistines as numerous as sand on the seashore. Saul's army was in panic. They were hiding, they were fleeing, they'd lost their faith. Saul was under stress. He waited the allotted time, but when Samuel didn't show up, and we aren't told why in the passage, he takes things into his own hands. Saul himself offers up the sacrifice rather than waiting for Samuel to do it. We read that he felt compelled to offer the burnt offering. Samuel arrives shortly afterwards and rebukes Saul for his foolish action. And this foolish adjective is one that indicates a moral and spiritual blameworthiness. So what did Saul do wrong? And was it really that bad? In this situation, what we see is that Saul has tried to manipulate God's favour in his stress. He's offered a sacrifice despite not being a priest. And he's tried to get God to do what he wants without regard for the way God has given the conditions on which his favour rests. Saul thinks that by cultic action he can cover his bases. By doing this, he shows that he is a king just like the nations around them. Ironically, exactly what Israel asked for, but not the king that God requires. God requires holiness and distinctiveness, and this comes through full trust in him. So Samuel declares, after rebuking him, that there will be no dynasty for Saul and his family, and that God will seek a man after his own heart. David will be that man, and while he's certainly not perfect, he's full of faith and humility. He is the man that God is seeking. The key difference between David and Saul, between David and the other kings around them, is this. So we see that we are being shown what God's kingship must look like and how it is part of the holiness of Israel. And it doesn't come in the kind of king that Saul wants to be, the kind of king that the rest of Israel wants. As Saul's kingship continues, we see more and more actions of a man who is not fully devoted to God. But he thinks pragmatically about what's good for him. He dresses it up as devotion to God, but his motives are clear to us, and his motives are even clearer to God. As Christian military leaders, You will inevitably face stresses in life and challenges to your faith. To be a member of God's kingdom requires us to be men and women after God's own heart. Jesus is the ultimate fulfillment of the King devoted to God, and through his work we can trust in God and take actions that reflect this trust, knowing that his will be done for his glory. So when you are tested or stressed, trust in God and take action that rests in his promises. Pray for wisdom, accept consequences, act with integrity, leave the outcome to God. When we trust in the life and work of Christ on the cross, we are not just like the nations around us, but we are part of his kingdom. Paul encourages us in Romans 12:2. He says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will."